I wanted to go long on corn and soybeans, and we were talking about the technicals, and I threw the idea out there saying the Yangtze River and the Yellow River, all those cities and farmlands near those two rivers are all flooded, and what they were discovering back then was they still got the northern east. They still got the northeastern farmlands and those warehouses where they put corn and soybeans in.
Right.
They thought they still have a large stockpile, which they don't because all those corrupt motherfuckers sold those things, you know, sold those things out long time ago. So those warehouses were practically empty. So when the central government went to inspect those grains, they burned the warehouses.
You're kidding. So no, there's no evidence?
Yeah, those officials, they burned those warehouses, framed them as like an accident, you know? So yeah, that's particularly interesting. And it has happened for, I don't know, 3, 4 times already. When there's central government officials come down there and inspect, they burn those warehouses. So basically,
what are they
China
thinking?
is in a food shortage situation. They have to import.
Mike, what do they think? They were in Chicago with doing that type of stuff?
I don't know that, man. So right now the situation is they have to import, but their their forex reserve has fell down below 1 trillion US dollars. I mean, the amount they can actually move is under $1 trillion. They say they have $3 trillion in reserve, but 2 trillion of which belongs to the foreign capital, you know, coming into China. So they couldn't move those because that doesn't belong to them. So the part of which they can move is under $1 trillion. So that's another situation. They don't have too much money to, you know, buy stuff from overseas, like from the United States and Brazil. I think that's why she wants to limit on the food expenses. That's why the clean plate policy was put in. And I think he's stupid because if you want to increase the supply on something, basic economics, right? You raise the prices. So everyone thinks there is a profit to be made and they will go out and plant plants to make a profit. And because the grain prices are so low in China, and practically nobody makes any money, not even the farmers. So there's no one is planting, and there's nowhere to be planted. So that's why it's causing this major problem in China. And as far as Taiwan goes, I think nothing changes. They will. I just don't think there will be a all-out conflict, a hot war. I just don't think that. I think they have enough on their plate right now. And she isn't having a good time here because some of the high-ranking officials in the Politburo are openly openly stating that they are not supporting Xi's policy. But well, Xi can remove those officials and find somebody from another post. I think. Well, that's what he always have done.
Wow. All right, got any other questions on that? Probably.
No, I think Mike absolutely covers it well. But I think he gives the answer as to why the imports from Chinese grain imports from the U.S. have been really ramped up. But I think that's for the immediate reasons is that they're worried about shortage. I think yes, because of ravages. They have drought, severe drought in some places, and severe flooding in others, and they just cannot afford. They cannot afford to be caught short grain here, and that's with the massive amounts of grain they bought from the Brazilians um, after the Brazilian harvest in February, March. So uh, again, grain prices look a little interesting. They can't get over the hump here. It's kind of as long as we're looking at it, the same with the Bloomberg index. Bloomberg commodity index has got started looking good, and then all of a sudden we're getting some rollback. Now the U.S. PMI numbers came out just 5 minutes ago, and they were hotter than expected. So you're seeing the dollar rally, interest rates move back up, the metals, which were under. I mean, again, gold. The algos went after the gold this morning prior to the New York opening and took it down, and then they rallied back $30. So getting all kinds of interesting movement. The euro yen, as we talked about, was performing well, and the yen was holding up. And now the yen is definitely caught in a overall better dollar story for the moment. How long it'll last, don't know. We'll see. By the end of the day, will tell me a lot more. With the euro yen correcting, now we're underneath some interesting technical levels at 124.80 area. Let's see how this sustains itself here. But again, that doesn't surprise me. Europe's numbers were softer. I think the geopolitical situation pertaining to Europe, meaning with Turkey and Belarus, are of more consequence in the short term because it is a Europe problem more than anybody else. And they have to figure out how to resolve this best can. So we're definitely getting some correction here, not in the equity markets, because again, let's see, the yield curves had actually flattened overnight. Now they're probably back steepening a little bit. Let's see. Doing really much of nothing. So we'll see where they go from here. That's all, but I think, and Mike's points, as we've talked, I think several times about Taiwan, and I think it bears right that Hong Kong is really a sideshow. If you really want to ramp up tensions, Taiwan is the place to play at. And I think Mike's right, they're not ready to go to any extreme. It's just watch them ramp up tensions a little bit and watch the U.S. Response to it. But that's all. And again, China's buying a lot of U.S. grain. Now, you can sell that under the initial trade agreement, phase one. But I think that China is worried about being caught short of grain here, and they're just trying to acquire as much as they can. And you know what? Prices aren't bad. Actually, prices favor the consumer right now. So China may as well buy all they can. And now with the yuan actually acting pretty good, so and the dollar a little bit weaker, not a bad time to load up.
Yeah, and Eric was pointed out too that, that whole storm system that went through Iowa and flattened half their crops, added to the bounce. Because when we first looked at it, Bosco was asking about it down here on the 12th, and it just didn't look like it was going to do anything. And then it put in that ORH day and just took off. The beans did, and so did the grain.
Judd, how does rice look?
Yeah, hold on. I was.
I'll put it up right now too.
Yeah, because I just thought of something.
Yeah, here. And this is the one that's been the strongest. I mean,
wrong screen, Judd.
Where the. Okay. If it breaks through this yesterday's high at 122 and a quarter, then it gets going. I mean, but this was really a nice pattern on the 19th over the 50 and 200 day moving averages. It's held.
Yeah, the reason I'm bringing this up is that the southern and west part of China, their main food, the main protein intake is rice, and the northern part of China, the main intake of protein is soybean and wheat. So all the flooded farmlands, they farm rice. And China usually import a lot of rice from India and Thailand. Now, India, they have conflict, right? So as much as they would like to reduce the import from India, I don't think they could do it. Even if they do, they probably will reduce the import from India and ramp up the import from the US. And now, this is the interesting part. What if a giant, outscaled tropical storm hits Thailand, right? I mean, this year we haven't seen that many tropical storms hitting Thailand and Malaysia yet. And what if there's a one giant outscaled tropical storm hits Malaysia? Then rice prices are due to go up by a lot, because Chinese, they don't have the farmland to farm rice anymore. They have to buy it either from us or India or Thailand.
Yeah, and this is, I think, U.S. wheat or rice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the different looks. You go out to the daily, it looks one way. You go out to an active weekly, the week's low is the 200-week moving average. I mean, that looks nice. And now it's starting to break out above the cloud on the daily. So yeah.
I think it's a good bet.
Yeah, and look at when this thing blew off too with the ORL day. Wow.
So is that a contract change or?
No, well, that's an act. Yeah, and that's also the active daily. So I think. So I'm not sure what contract that was in June, which was front month. To go back and look. Here.
So it went limit up 4 days in a row back then.
Oh yeah, it was just crazy. And then it blew off. This right here is a contract roll, because you see all those dots.
Uh-huh.
That's definitely a contract roll. But if you go to an active, that's a big contract gap right there, rollover gap, huge. So if it goes back to, $1.34, it'd be nothing. It was a 10% move.
Yeah. And Ira, I got a question for you. Um, what's your viewpoint on the U.S. moving troops out of Germany and into Poland? What's
Mike,
the political implication on that?
I don't have an answer. I thought about it. I looked at it, and more maybe into Latvia and Lithuania and Estonia. That's what they're talking about. It's definitely an east move. The Russians won't like it because again, it's moving closer, of course, to the Ukraine, and this is what the Russians have been said about for quite a while anyway, because NATO wasn't supposed to expand its reach that far east. I don't know at this point. I don't know because we haven't seen the in-depth of this move. Is it being done to rattle the Russians for whatever reasons? I don't know. I really don't know about this one. We'll have to see. We'll have to see how far east they really push. And there are those who think that it was just Trump trying to rattle Merkel and the German political establishment for not being more forthcoming and putting reaching that 2% threshold for defense spending. So I don't know. I don't know where they're going with this one. It's not a whole lot of troops, by the way, although it's a big hit to certain communities in Germany because they've sustained U.S. troops for 70 years, 75 years. And there's been a comfort there, but I don't know. I don't know. I have to see how big it is. And it's way too early. Because they could actually rescind this and go back on it at any time. The troops really haven't been moved yet. It's, a small amount, but we'll see. It's more important, is it just directed at the Russians to give them just to raise some tensions and tweak them a little bit. So I don't know. I don't have an answer. I don't have a quality answer.
And how about Japan joining the Five Eyes?
Well, that would be interesting. I'm sure the Chinese would not view with anything positive, but from a U.S. standpoint, it certainly would make a lot of sense. Why not put them in? And the Japanese are certainly a highly advanced technological nation. And listen, everybody in East Asia is worried about the Chinese. So that would make perfect sense. But let's see if it really takes place.
Yeah, one thing for me is that Japan as the losing Axel country in World War II, they don't have the right to provoke a war, but there's nothing says they can't join a war. So if Japan comes into the Five Eyes, and one day there's a South China Sea conflict or Taiwan conflict, Japan can just go right into it because it's the alliance with the United States, right?
Yeah. Oh no. Well, listen. Yeah, those are defensive alliances. Well, we saw that during the Gulf War when the Japanese actually sent types of support ships into the Gulf region. There was a lot of intense discussion about it, and of course, one of Abe's desires has been to get rid of, what is it, Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution about nothing more than basically a Coast Guard and National Guard force, but no really extensive forwarding of military. So he's been trying to overturn that and has not been able to get it done. It's one of the things that he certainly has not accomplished. So the Japanese are just not ready to throw off the. It's fairly long history now of pacifism. There's many good things to be said about it. It allows them to develop a huge safety net and not have to bear the cost of defense spending. So I think that's overall positive, and they've liked that they haven't involved themselves in international conflicts. So
you know, with the population declining and a lack of, a small new generation coming on, it's kind of hard to staff up a military too for them, wouldn't it?
Well, in today's technological world, though, you can put forth an aggressive military with a lot less manpower and more
especially if you're an island.
Yeah. But I think the Japanese have really grown comfortable in that role. You know, people criticize the Germans for the same thing. Yet, there's a lot of people in Germany who are very comfortable, with some soft power type of foreign policy, but nothing aggressive, and it allows them to develop much more social infrastructure. And you know what? It's benefited them very well at this point, and I would probably say benefited the world at this point. By the way, it's been one less bellicose voice, and that's a good thing. Same with the Japanese.
Yeah, it is a good thing, because if that restriction was lifted, then who knows what would happen. After all, they were crazy enough to bomb the Pearl Harbor.
Listen, yeah, Japan could become a nuclear power, nuclear military power in probably a day and a half with their technology. So yes, it's been a good thing, and it's there's a lot of discussion about whether it's been good for Japan to be under the U.S. Quote unquote umbrella, but that umbrella is changing too. So everybody is on edge, trying to figure out where this is going to go from here. And I think that's where one area China has to be very careful, because they don't want to set off an arms race. It's not in their interest, I don't believe, because then the world becomes much more destabilized. So got to be very, very careful with this, because they know the Japanese can become a nuclear military power in a second. So the world is better off without that. So, in my opinion, but.
And do you think Middle East becomes more stable when Israelis and the UAE build a diplomatic relationship?
That's an interesting question, because you have to look at it, I think, more through Shiite Sunni eyes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That conflict has been on the boil for quite a while, and a lot of the Sunni nations, they've known it. The Israelis are not looking to put forward aggressive action. Now if you're a Palestinian, you'll argue, oh yes, they have, but there's been no bellicose actions against Sunni Muslim states. They've never attacked Saudi Arabia. They never attacked Iraq with the nuclear stability.
Well, yeah, well, there were missile attacks. There were missile attacks this year against Saudi Arabia on their oil facilities.
Yes, but
Came
that came
out of
from
a,
we believe that came from the Yemeni, the Shiites in Yemen, but we've not
yeah,
heard anything more
Iran
about that.
proxies.
So I mean, there are all types of things, but yeah, Mike, I think it bodes well for stability, but it'll put a lot of pressure on the Palestinians because the Sunni oil producers have, I believe, sustained that conflict far longer because it was in their interest. And I've always believed that if everybody would actually get out of the way, they'd find a way to make peace in the region rather than everybody always putting their 2 cents and supporting one side, the other side, and ramping up everybody's expectations. I think you're going to see some. Now, I've read a lot in the last week from different from people I generally disagree with about how they saw the UAE and how this was being done. And if you're an anti-Trumper, automatically you see all types of nefarious things here in regards to the Saudis, UAE, in reference to Trump. But I think that what this will do is force the Palestinians to go, okay, what do we really want here? And everything I read about the Emirates is that that's where they expect to go to next, how to craft a real peace. But instead of getting peace with the Palestinians first, they've turned it on its head and they want to make peace with the Israelis and then work from there. So, again, I'm not sure. And it all depends who the Biden foreign policy team is. So there are a lot of moving parts going on here. But are they?
I think it might. If I might interject, right? If I could interject, one thing is that I think Saudi is, there's a lot of problems in Saudi. That they're probably going broke. Their leader is a pretty sketchy guy, and UAE probably is looking for Israel to give them some backstop them, give some defense, strategic weight against Iran. I'm just thinking, why I think there's some need in UAE for Israeli weaponry at some level to backstop them. And you go back to the nuclear thing with Iran, going at it to become a nuclear power. All of a sudden, Israel is important as a nuclear power to Iran's enemies. What do you think about that?
They were talking about that last night, overnight, guys, and there were a couple of Bloomberg articles out about the F-35, the UAE getting F-35 planes because they
Right.
want them.
Yeah, so we have all those things in play. The interesting thing is, and as long as Mike's on, I find Iran very duplicitous, how unusual. But here, when the UAE announced what they announced and the Israelis announced last week, the Iranians said it's a stab in the back. That's, of course, a reference to 1919, by the way, when they use that terminology for anybody who studies history. But my problem, because they said they were stabbing all of Islam in the back. My problem with that is the Iranians are cutting more big deals with the Chinese, who the rest of the world is attacking for their
policy on Muslims.
On the Uyghurs. Yes, and here come the Iranians. So you know what? To the Iranians, I say you're full of shit.
Yeah.
Right? Because they, based on that, they should have been standing up and screaming, bloody murder. But it's everybody else in the world, and the Iranians are just cutting one deal after another. Now you could say, in the typical Maoist fashion, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Okay, but you can't then get up on your high horse and decry what the UAE did. And that's the foreign policy aspect. What does this mean for energy? Far less than it did 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Because with the movement into alternative energies, and there is a real movement, how fast it'll come, we'll see. a lot of these countries are becoming um, so marginal to the world. You know, they're like the Saudis were of paramount importance as long as oil was the mainstay of all. And every year it becomes a less important element. So as they lose their leverage, they have to start looking at things in a much different way. And I think that also has to do with a lot of why a lot of the Arab states, especially the oil producers, are looking at the Israelis and go, okay, you know, how long are we going to, this worked for as long as it worked, and now it's not. You know, it's like, let's go back to 1973, which everybody uses as an important period of time, because the Yom Kippur War, uh, in which the Saudis, especially, and OPEC in general, ramped up the political leverage of oil. But I've always maintained that, first and foremost, they did that with the oil as a response to the weaker dollar, by the way. That was paramount. They used it in the political discussion because it fit them well, but they were more concerned that the dollar was depreciating. And here they were selling oil basically at the same price, you know, $1.50, $1.75, $2 a barrel. And they were receiving a depreciating asset for a number of years. So, you know, the economic argument held sway as much as the politics. In fact, probably more when you really cut through it. So now we're at a point where the oil does not give them the leverage that they had before. So it's like, okay, let's remove this, and they're better off doing business with the Israelis. The Israelis are a high-tech bastion of the high-tech world. There's been no bellicosity. There's never been an attack by the Israelis upon the Saudis, the UAE, Oman, Qatar. There's just never been an attack. There's never been an attack by the Israelis upon the Iranians. I know, maybe with Stuxnet, but we don't know about that. That's as much the CIA as anybody. And from an Israeli point of view, it's actually a pretty good thing because, you know, because Israel, they're not under the umbrella in a way that Japan has been under the umbrella, or because there's no official alliance. There's always talk of it. But the Israelis are prohibited, as the Chinese know, from selling some advanced military goods that they've developed or improved. You know, it just does not sit well with the United States, never has. And therefore, the Israelis are really kept out of the global arms market, where they could really sell some things. So that's going to get more and more discussion. The Chinese are not very happy because they were busy trying to make deals with Israeli advanced technology. And they were very recently thwarted by, again, but it's not the first time, because every White House has embarked upon that policy. So the world is really going to get very interesting. But I think that has much more to do that the Sunni Arabs go, we just don't need this. It's a distraction from so many other. They're really worried about Iran's influence, and they used a playbook that when autocrats, and certainly Iran is ruled by autocrats, when their power starts slipping, they always go towards foreign types of interventions in order to distract from the domestic situation and try to rally a nationalistic response. So, I mean, these are things, if you're looking forward, make perfect sense, and let's see where it goes. Because supposedly, now from what I understand, and I've read quite a bit about this, is that the signing ceremony is going to take place, I know it's hard to believe, the last week of October, right before the election.
Just before the election, huh?
Just before the election. And from what some pretty good analysts who I read had to say, is that it's not going to be just the UAE. Look for Sudan and a couple others, maybe even Oman and Qatar, to actually be in the official signing ceremony. So that gets bigger and bigger, and then of course becomes a bigger and bigger news story. So it's just something to pay attention to.
Do you think in the next 2 months somebody's going to try to sabotage the deal?
Uh, yes, the Mideast, everybody tries to sabotage everything. Well, I mean, that's certainly the history. But you know what? UAE is a pretty formidable foreign policy player. You know, they get their, for a country with nothing but some energy, not some, but a lot of, they do a pretty good job of putting themselves front and center. So the question, Mike, is I do, of course, you know what, but things are different. You know, it's like the same, you know, it's like the people who all said that, well, when the U.S. recognized Jerusalem, you were going to have a massive uprising and nothing.
Right.
So you could see that reflects how things are changing, You know what? And then another amazing thing, we don't know what's really going on in Lebanon. Okay, so there's been no look there, and its impact upon the region is certainly great. But Hezbollah and Hamas have both been pretty quiet through a lot of different things going on here. So that always gets my attention too, because why? What are they waiting for? Or have they too come to a realization that the shifting sand, so to speak, mean that where they had influence before, their influence is starting to wane, and they may have military influence, but I don't think that they want to go there. You know, I've always been convinced that after Hezbollah's last effort, when they embarked upon attacking Israel, that Israel's response, which was destroying Lebanon, was not good for Hezbollah. And how many more times could that be where people rebuilt an area only to have it destroyed through wanton behaviors of Hezbollah, which is really a terrorist organization who's come to rule Lebanon? Because why? They have the most arms and they have the most fighting experience. And the Lebanese military was never anything to speak of because it was so badly divided between the Shiites, the Sunnis, and the Druze. So they were never a really good unified fighting force, which is why the Syrians ran them over when they took over Lebanon, and the Israelis, when they wanted to, walked in and really were not met with any type of genuine counterforce. So it's a very interesting time, yes, but of course, those who would like to prevent it from happening will I'm sure we'll see some type of action because they play the politic game too. But I think people are more interested, a lot of players in the region, to see how the U.S. election goes. If it's Trump back in, then I think you're going to see a rush to make deals all over the place. If it's the Biden team and therefore the Obama Mideast foreign policy team, if that's what we get, then we'll see sand shifting back the other way, and people will be trying to reposition themselves that way. Because remember, Netanyahu and the Obama team were not, in fact, even Biden, were not good to each other or for each other. They were working at odds. So there's a lot of animosity built up there. So that's what people are going to play on. And it's too early to tell. It's really too early to tell. But I think the point is that will those who can try to create some conflict work to create conflict? I think absolutely they will. Because that's the history, again, of the region.
Cool. Thanks, Ira.
Yep.
Beautiful. Thanks for the conversation. It adds a lot of color in a lot of different places. All right, so you know you got a few names going one way. You just have to look at the hourlies here in Apple and Google and Nvidia to see if that they and Baba to see if they can. You know, you're just looking for directional exhaustion. That's it. You know, David's got a 491 target in Apple. You know, the way it's trading, you can get there. So all you can do is manage your trades.